Alright, y'all know what an iceberg image is, and chances are if you clicked on this video, you know what these are too. Cool. Now that that's out of the way, let me explain my thought process for this video. One night, when I was doing my routine of staying up way later than I should, I suddenly thought, man, I wish someone made a mother iceberg video. So I looked on YouTube, and sure enough, I found one, which covered this iceberg made by this guy on Reddit. And after watching it, all I could think to myself was, man, I wish someone made a good mother iceberg video. And with that, I got to work and found the original Reddit post. But along the way, I found two more iceberg images, made by these fine individuals, and they were both much meatier than the other one. So, because I'm indecisive and didn't feel like making multiple videos, I decided to make one big video covering all of them. And for the viewing pleasure of the audience, I combined the images into one big, neat, and organized iceberg. Plus, I added a few points of my own. While working on this, I was in contact with the creators of these two images, who I'll refer to as Star and Gabe throughout the video. Big thanks to them, as they clarified and explained to me some of the points that I hadn't heard of before, and this video probably wouldn't exist without their help. Now then, what awaits us on this iceberg? Will we find something cool? Something strange? Or perhaps something a bit more sinister? Only one way to find out, so let's begin. Earthbound 64. This one's pretty well known by now. For those unaware, Mother 3 originally started development on the N64 and was shown off at Space World 1999. Due to a ton of problems with development, the game was cancelled later that same year, but was later brought back onto development in 2003 for the GBA, and eventually completed and released in 2006. There isn't much, but the footage and screenshots of the beta that we do have are very interesting, and I highly recommend you look into them yourself. Tony is gay. In an interview with Shigesato Itoi in 2003, he says there's a gay person in Mother 2, a really passionate friend who lives in an England-like place. Obviously, he's referring to Tony, Jeff's roommate. He then said that because gay children exist in real life, and that he has several gay friends, he decided to add one in the game too. Nice. Gygas fetus theory. This is probably the most widespread Earthbound theory of all. Even people who never played any of the games have probably at least heard of this. For those who somehow don't know, there is a distinct outline of a human fetus in the background of Gygas' fourth phase. For years, people speculated that Gygas is a fetus when Ness encounters him in the Cave of the Past, and that killing him is aborting the fetus. Some evidence people used for this theory was that the Devil's Machine is supposed to represent the uterus, with all the intestine-like tubes leading up to it, and that the entrance to Gygas' lair is supposed to be a, well, you know. However, this theory isn't true. Itoi explained that the fetus shape in the Gygas background is just a coincidence due to how Earthbound generates its backgrounds. Plus, the theory contradicts Itoi's explanation of Gygas' inspiration, which has nothing to do with abortion. Fetus theory also falls short when you take Gygas' origin story from Earthbound Beginnings into account, as well as other plot details. Although it's not specified how far into the past Ness and his friends travel to fight Gygas, the Cave of the Past looks drastically different in the past than it does in the present, so it's most likely hundreds or even thousands of years ago, and there's just no way Gygas could have been born that long ago when he was just an infant in the early 1900s. Plus, he's part of an alien species from another solar system. Why would he be born deep underground on Earth? It just doesn't add up. Cursed images with Earthbound music. In early 2019, there started a trend of videos of still images with various battle themes from the Mother games playing over them on the internet. I remember seeing a lot of those videos, but they died out in popularity around May of that same year. Not quite sure why this is on here. The 8 melodies. They're the things you have to collect in Earthbound Beginnings and Earthbound. Specifically, this refers to what they actually are in-game, like how in the first one they're part of the lullaby used to defeat Gygas, while in the second they're the song that embodies the power of the Earth. PSI was stolen from Gygas' race. While George and Maria were being held captive by the aliens, George began studying PSI without their permission. He then somehow escaped back to Earth with this information and continued studying it. Not much more to say here, this is basic lore told in Earthbound Beginnings, plus it's the entire reason Gygas invades Earth in the first place. Localization changes. There are a metric fuckton of changes made from Mother 2 to Earthbound, more than I could possibly fit in this video. There's literally a 432-page book on Earthbound's localization that goes into great detail on what changes were made. If you really want to know about all the changes made, just go to the cutting room floor, or just buy the goddamn book yourself and read it. Earthbound's anti-piracy measures. Earthbound has very infamous anti-piracy measures coded into the game, which are split into 5 different layers, so to speak. The first layer is just the region locking. It simply checks if you're playing the game on a PAL SNES, and if so, it will show this screen and freeze. The second layer is the SRAM check. This is the first actual barrier against pirates. The The game checks that there's only 8 kilobytes of SRAM on the cartridge, since cartridge copiers, by their nature, tend to have more than that. If there's more than 8 kilobytes, the game shows this warning screen and freezes. The third layer is where things get interesting. If the game detects that the previous 2 layers were disabled, then enemy spawn rates are ramped up to insane levels that make the game nearly unplayable. So much so that enemies start to spawn in places they shouldn't, like spiteful crows spawning in the pyramid. Some areas try to spawn so many enemies that the game just crashes. These are usually peaceful areas that don't normally spawn enemies, like the 3 tunnels and even the Tabula Theater main office. If the game doesn't crash, then the player will see glitched enemies with very strange properties. They'll appear as NPCs or player characters in the overworld and use garbage data values for item drops and EXP rewards, dropping things like backstage passes and absurd amounts of EXP, often reaching in the millions. Of course, you'll only get these drops if you use an auto-win every fight code, as confronting them normally will crash the game. The fourth layer is called 6 times during the game, but no one actually knows what it does. Finally, if you somehow get through the entire game, the 5th layer is the most evil one of all. Once Porky turns off the Devil's Machine, the game performs one final checksum routine to see if the previous layers were activated. If it detects anything wrong, the game will freeze and delete all save data. Diabolical. Super Smash Bros. Saved the series from obscurity. Yeah, pretty much. Prior to Smash, Mother 1 was only released in Japan, and when Earthbound was brought over to North America, it completely bombed. Hell, it never even released at all in Europe. I think it's safe to assume that the vast majority of Mother fans, myself included, were introduced to the series because of Ness and Lucas being in Smash. The fact that Ness is more well known for his appearances in Smash than in his own game, much like another Smash 64 veteran, is pretty telling. The Halloween Hack. In 2008, Toby Fox released a ROM hack titled Earthbound Halloween Hack for Starman.net's Halloween Fun Fest. The hack's pretty notable for being the start of Toby's career, as well as the first appearance of the song Megalovania, and a couple of ideas from the hack were later used for Flowey and Undertale. Nowadays, the hack really isn't looked upon very highly due to its colorful language. Musical references. The Mother series is filled to the brim with musical references, some more obvious than others. I'd be here for an eternity if I were to list all of them, so I'll only mention a couple. This barely scratches the surface, but just go look them up for yourself. Queen Mary's true identity. At the end of Earthbound Beginnings, Queen Mary is revealed to be the same Maria that was abducted in the opening text of the game, and that she raised Gygus. Again, this is literally stated in-game, not sure why it's here. Sans is Ness. Stop me if you've heard this one before. I'm pretty sure everyone and their grandma has at least heard of the Ness is Sans game theory video by now. There are so many holes, logical errors, and wild assumptions made in that video that it's actually insane how many people used to believe it. Not to mention that it straight up contradicts itself at multiple points. I'd go into more detail on why it's completely false, but so many others have done so already, and I don't want to continue beating the ashes of a dead horse, so let's move on. Boss backsprites. Every enemy in Mother 3 has a backsprite for when you turn them around or approach them from behind, including some bosses and mini-bosses. However, since bosses can't be turned around and can't be approached from behind, it's impossible to see their backsprites in-game, thus making them unused. Casey Bat backstory. The Casey Bat in Earthbound is named after the poem Casey at the Bat, where a star baseball player, Casey, gets cocky and purposely doesn't swing the first 2 pitches, but then misses the 3rd pitch, striking out. This is why the Casey Bat has a 75% chance to miss. Ness's Magicant sprite in Mother 2. In Mother 2, Ness is naked during Magicant instead of in his pajamas. This is because nudity is a symbol of purity in Japan. This was changed in Earthbound for obvious reasons. Rare equips and enemies. There's a few enemies that are especially hard to come by, but usually give great rewards as a result. I'll be listing the most notable ones. In Earthbound, the Criminal Caterpillar and Master Criminal Worm are super rare enemies only found in Dusty Dunes Desert and Scaraba respectively. They don't give you any money, but they give you insane amounts of EXP for killing them, with the Master Criminal Worm giving the most EXP from any enemy in the game. The Soot Dumpling and Beanling enemies in Mother 3 serve the same purpose. The last rare enemy I'll mention is the Bionic Kraken in Earthbound, which can rarely spawn in the Cave of the Past. The reason I'm mentioning this one is because it segues into the other part of this point, rare equipment. In both games, the absolute best equipment for certain characters is only obtainable via rare drop from an enemy, which is usually a 1 in 128 chance in Earthbound and a 3% chance in Mother 3. These weapons typically increase more stats than just offense and have other effects, which is why these items are usually dubbed as the ultimate equipment. The most famous ones are probably the Sword of Kings and the Gutsy Bat, as the former is Pooh's only weapon in the game and can only be dropped by a limited time enemy, and the latter is only dropped by the Bionic Kraken, an already rare enemy to begin with, in the last area of the game. The usefulness of the Gutsy Bat is debatable due to this. Gygus inspired Mew and Mewtwo. There's no official confirmation for this, but there's way too much circumstantial evidence for it not to be true. Aside from the fact that Mewtwo looks like the result of putting Gygus and Frieza into a blender, they're both cat-like creatures that use psychic abilities, hate humanity, and are incredibly powerful. It's important to note that Ape Inc., one of the devs of the first two Mother games, rebranded as Creatures Inc. in 1995 and have co-developed nearly every Pokemon game, meaning that it's very likely Mewtwo is made as a callback. Gen 1 Pokemon already has a lot of similarities to Earthbound Beginnings, so it wouldn't even be that out of place. Phil Sandhop. Phil Sandhop was the localization producer and English scriptwriter for Earthbound Beginnings. In an interview, he answered a lot of questions fans had about the leaked Earthbound prototype, and confirmed that it was in fact a real localization done by Nintendo of America, and not just a bootleg. He also gave details on how the game was pretty much completed, and the only major thing that stopped it from releasing was a lack of marketing. I'll link the full article in the description for anyone interested. Flint's Doorknob. Flint's Doorknob is a running gag in Mother 3 that can be found or referenced in every chapter except 2, 5, and 6. In Chapter 1, Thomas accidentally breaks off Flint's doorknob when trying to summon him. When Flint answers the door, Thomas quickly throws it off to the side, bouncing on top of Boney's doghouse and landing behind a wall. In Chapter 3, you can find the doorknob in Nippolite's potato patch. If Salsa tries picking it up, Facade will yank it from his hands, tell him not to pick up cheap doorknob-like things, and then chucks it into the river. From this point on, the doorknob is only mentioned and isn't actually seen until much later. In Chapter 4, an NPC in the Tazmily jail was arrested for picking up a doorknob he found on the ground, presumably Flint's doorknob. At the beginning of Chapter 7, on the bridge where Ionia is found, a bald NPC says he found a doorknob the other day, but he was very frustrated, so he threw it as far to the east as he could, dislocating his shoulder in the process. In Chapter 8, a Pigmask captain in the lobby of the Empire Pork Building says he discovered a doorknob in the Clayman factory, but like the NPC in Chapter 7, threw it as far away as he could out of irritation. Later in Chapter 8, when the party is traveling underneath Newport City, the doorknob can be found in plain sight sitting on a ledge, but attempting to pick it up will cause Lucas to accidentally knock it off the ledge. Finally, in the end screen, the player themselves comes across the doorknob, picks it up, and puts it in their inventory, finally obtaining it once and for all. Itoi deliberately left it ambiguous as to what the doorknob represents, and it spawned a lot of fan theories and speculation, one of which is even on the Iceberg. The Lazy Mole. One of the moles in Chapter 5 tells a weird story about a lazy mole. He doesn't remember it very well, so he skips to the end saying that the mole lived happily ever after. Not much else to say here. Mr. Saturn Font. The Mr. Saturns talk in a very weird looking font in both versions of the game, but their font in Mother 2 was based on Itoi's daughter's handwriting at the time. Unused assets. There's a lot of unused assets in these games, a good number of which have their own entries here. This is just a general summary of the less interesting ones. For graphics, there's this animation of Pooh jumping, this unused sprite of Ness's mom sitting, these sprites of Ness and Paula sitting with their eyes closed, these sprites of Ness, the photographer, and the Escargo Express delivery man clearly meant for the Lost Underworld, this unused item in Mother 3 called the Memory Snake, some animations for the Barrier Trio, various animations for the Mask Man, and this animation of Porky seemingly dying. Mother 3 also has this large unused room, as well as a debug room which gives you access to quite a number of things. Interestingly, the Zap Eel enemy in Earthbound's overworld sprite is partially obscured by the water, as it always spawns in there in the deep darkness. However, it is possible to see their entire sprite by luring them out onto land, but doing this is very hard and can only be done in like 1 or 2 spots. As for audio, there's a bunch of unused music tracks in Earthbound and Mother 3. I'm not gonna play them here, but you can find them pretty easily on the cutting room floor if you want. Mother 3 ending is the afterlife. The end of Mother 3 shows the Nowhere Islands getting destroyed by tornadoes, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, all caused by the Dark Dragon being awakened. After all this though, you're able to talk to all the characters throughout the game, who say that they're all okay after that. A lot of people interpret this end sequence as the afterlife, as who the hell could possibly survive what just happened moments before, right? Well, the canon explanation for Mother 3's ending is that whatever you, the player, truly wanted to happen when Lucas pulled the final needle, happened. The ending was purposefully left open and up to the player's interpretation, so there's really no wrong answer for what happens after the Dark Dragon awakens. My personal take on it is that the Dark Dragon reset the Nowhere Islands, rid them of all the evil influence in the world, mainly the Pigmask army, but let everyone else survive, which is why everyone is okay afterwards. Again though, that's just my interpretation and you're free to disagree. Ness is theories. These are theories in the same vein as Sans' Ness, but Sans is swapped out with character of choice. Consequently, they're all really dumb, so I'm not gonna waste my time going over them. Except for one, which I'll get to later. Buzz's prophecy. Buzz's prophecy at the beginning of Earthbound has some very weird subtext that never gets addressed, with things like Shatter the Nightmare Rock and See the Light. The prophecy as a whole is obviously about the quest to stop Gygus, but there's little details like that which stand out. Mother Cognitive Dissonance. Cognitive Dissonance is a fan game that takes place shortly after Earthbound Beginnings and details events that happen between that game and Earthbound. I ended up playing this game while working on this video and it's very good. The soundtrack is mostly great, and the story is really well done and expands on the alien lore, something the actual games never talk about. I highly recommend playing it if you're a fan of the series, which you probably are, I mean why else would you be watching this video? I do think it has some problems though, but this isn't a Cogdis review so I'll stop talking now and move on. The Franklin Badge was made by Benjamin Franklin. The item description for the Franklin Badge in Earthbound Beginnings reads, "Legend says that Ben Franklin wore this reflective badge during his experiments with lightning." I guess this isn't the weirdest thing in the world, seeing how Earthbound Beginnings takes place in America, but it's still kinda weird. Pig masks represent America. It's the common consensus that the Pigmask army represents capitalism and by extension America. I mean, they're literally pig masks. There's a location literally called New Pork City, and they introduce money and greed to Tasmily, two things associated with capitalism. Plus, the invasion of the Nowhere Islands could be a reference to America forcing Japan to modernize, but that one's a stretch. But upon looking into it, that's really all the Pigmask army has going for them for this comparison. If anything, they're more similar to the Nazi regime in North Korea, with a little bit of America mixed in. They're an armed, organized force, led by an absolute dictator, conduct cruel biological experiments in the form of chimeras. Their soldiers are practically walking propaganda machines, to the point of blaring their anthem out of their saucers, and anyone who doesn't accept their propaganda, in the form of happy boxes, is punished. Also, their salute looks like this. Yeah. Mother 1 soundtrack with English-speaking singers. In 1989, some of the music from the game was recorded as a studio album by Keiichi Suzuki and Hirokazu Tanaka, in collaboration with various artists. It has 11 tracks, 7 of which have vocals that, despite the game not releasing outside of Japan, are entirely in English. The album actually goes really hard, and I highly recommend giving it a listen. Kindness and Consider. Consider is an unused battle action in Mother 3. Nothing happens when using Consider in battle via hacking, and it's unknown how it would have worked. Though maybe it would have been this game's equivalent of Sing and Pray and have had an endgame use. As for Kindness, it's a sort of unused stat, with its description in the unused memo screen reading, "This is one of the most important things for us humans, so let's be kind to others. If your kindness goes up, something good is bound to happen." Some sprites of Porky's death, Flint killing the Mecha Drago, and a happy end graphic might indicate that this stat might have triggered alternate story events. Notice how I said sort of unused. That's because it actually is used in the final game, can be increased through normal gameplay, and even has gameplay effects, but you just have no way of seeing it. Whenever the message, "You felt something warm inside your heart," appears, kindness increases by 1 for the whole party. It directly influences the amount of HP restored when Lucas uses PSI Life Up, but no other known effects appear for other characters, not even Kumatora, another user of Life Up. However, since opportunities to raise kindness are so rare, it never exceeds the single digits, and as such, its effects during gameplay are unnoticeable. The Make-Believe Theory. This is a theory suggesting that Ness, Paula, Jeff, and Pooh are all little kids, and Earthbound is based on what they imagined during playtime. Essentially, it's just saying that the whole game was their imagination. I have 2 problems with this. 1. This theory only works when looking at Earthbound as a standalone game and falls apart when you throw Mother 1 and 3 into the mix. And 2. Can I just say how much I fucking hate It Was All a Dream or X characters in a coma theories? They feel so lazy and uninspired. You can literally apply one of those to any piece of fiction. While I do appreciate that the post that this originated from actually gave some details and connections, I'm still pretty biased against these kinds of theories if you couldn't already tell. Kirby and Earthbound. In the boot up debug menu, the menu cursor is Kirby. Weirdly enough, this Kirby sprite is from Kirby's Dream Course, which didn't come out in Japan until about a month after Mother 2 did. HAL was working on both games at the same time, so they probably just used this Kirby sprite as both an Easter egg and because it was the most readily available. Dungeon Man is the first Chimera. Think about it. In Mother 3, Porky forced Dr. Antonauts to make mechanized animals, combined animals, and completely new animals like the ultimate Chimera. In Earthbound, the Doctor makes Dungeon Man by combining Brick Road with a dungeon. So, technically, Dungeon Man is the original Chimera. Manny Manny statue sprite error. The Manny Manny statue and Ness's Nightmare might have accidentally had their sprites swapped, since Ness's Nightmare has the colors of the real statue, while the Manny Manny statue fight in Moonside has a different color palette than its overworld sprite. Granted, several enemies in Earthbound have different color palettes than their overworld sprites, but these are just stronger versions of weaker enemies from earlier in the game. Many older games do this to save memory. But this is the one case where the weaker enemy, or boss in this case, has a different palette than its overworld sprite, and the stronger one has the correct palette. If I'm being honest, I was never sure if this was a mistake or intentional. Maybe I'm just so used to it that it doesn't seem off. Sunset at the Log House. There's a hidden warp out of bounds in Club Titty-Boo in the far left of the lobby. When accessed, you'll get warped outside of Alex's house. There appears to be a sunset happening, and your inventory will be replaced with a new one that contains some unused items. This might have been used for a cutscene in the prologue before Chapter 1 begins, but that's just me speculating. Mother 3 Memo Menu. Try saying that 5 times fast. In the Japanese version, there's an unused feature called the Memo Menu. These memos describe various game mechanics and characters, as well as some old mechanics and scrapped features. The menu was restored in the English fan translation and can be accessed by pressing L and R while selecting Status. A few of the memos are unlocked through normal gameplay, but many never get triggered, rendering them unused. Hank's Bat is a reference to Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron is a former MLB player who played from 1954 to 1976 and was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1982. Nintendo's strongest weapon, Hank's Bat, says it's personally autographed, and it doesn't take much to connect the dots. The Apple of Enlightenment. This thing is mentioned a couple times in Earthbound, and while it sounds like it's very important, it's never actually seen in-game. After Ness defeats his Nightmare and Magicant, his consciousness tells him the Apple of Enlightenment has foretold that Gygas' attempt will fail. However, in Mother 2, he says that the apple is actually a prophecy-telling machine that Gygas has, and it has foretold that his plans will fail at the hands of a child named Ness. That's really the most information there is on the apple. Of course, the Apple of Enlightenment is a pretty big part in the story of cognitive dissonance, but fan games aren't canon. The pointlessness of reindeer in Earthbound Beginnings. This one sort of explains itself. The town has a department store that sells items the same level as other towns, it has enemies that can be fought elsewhere, and the only unique place in town, the mansion where you give the guy dentures so he can give you infinite mouthwash, is useless because only a few towns later is the man who gives you free life up cream. I feel like the only reason this town exists is because everything is closed in Spokane, so they probably added reindeer just for a convenient rest stop, but that's just what I think. Somewhat related, but that mouthwash guy isn't totally useless. Once you complete the old man's side quest, the mouthwash he sells there is way cheaper than anywhere else, meaning that you can sell them at a department store for more than you buy them. So that's technically infinite money right there. Then again, you can also do this with the life up cream guy, and those sell for more, and you also get those for free. Damn, this place really is useless. The Magypsies are the main reason why Mother 3 hasn't been released outside Japan. There's a lot of things possibly getting in the way of Mother 3 getting localized, but this one specifically is because the Magypsies are perceived as trans stereotypes and would probably be seen as offensive. I asked Star why they thought this issue in particular was the main reason, to which they responded, "It's because with how Nintendo is as a company, they don't want to be seen as some political entity. Because the game was made over a decade ago, well before anything we're discussing now was discussed, it's likely they don't want to deal with Americans trying to interpret a Japanese perspective from 2006 and 2021, making harsh moral judgments based on outdated taboos from different cultures." Suspicious Osohe garbage can. This refers to the garbage can you get sent back to if you get caught by the magic brooms. Upon asking Gabe why he included this, he just said he finds it weird that there's a 21st century trash can in this old castle. It is slightly larger than the other trash cans in the game, but it's still just a trash can. Pee-pee fight. There's an unused enemy in Earthbound Beginnings that appears to be Pee-pee, and it's just called Gang Zombie. It's possible that Pee-pee was originally supposed to attack Ninten when she was freed from the coffin, and defeating her could have brought her back to her senses. The identity of the actors for the live-action Mother 1 commercial. There was a commercial for Mother 1 in Japan when the game was released that featured real kids in it. Apparently nobody knows the identity of the kids used in that commercial. Or maybe someone does. I don't know. I couldn't find it. The military policeman and the dismembered beauty murder scene. When Itoi was a child, he accidentally walked into the wrong theater, which was showing an adult film called The Military Policeman and the Dismembered Beauty. He saw what he thought was a rape scene and was deeply scarred by it. This event was later used as the main inspiration for the Gygas fight in Earthbound, which aimed to recapture that sense of childhood trauma and fear. This is why all of his lines in that fight appear to be him in pain, or occasionally pleasure. However, Itoi admitted that his memory of that scene was fuzzy at best, and as it turns out, the movie doesn't even have a rape scene. What he actually saw was a woman being strangled to death and then having her body cut up into pieces by her killer. She never says anything like, "It hurts." The only sound she makes is one squawk. Takeshi's challenge nearly made Nintendo cancel Mother 1. According to Star, Nintendo was hesitant to work on another celebrity tie-in game after Takeshi's challenge tanked, fearing that Mother would do the same. They only remember hearing this from some YouTubers, so unfortunately the sources on this one might be a bit shoddy. Duster's broken bass. No, this isn't talking about the jealous bass. He's still a perfectly usable bass. In Mother 3, each party member has an attack instrument, and one of 6 different 3-part melodies of that instrument will play when performing a combo. However, due to a bug, Duster's chosen attack melody isn't randomized like everyone else's, being 0-0 all the time, meaning he will always use this melody when attacking. But that's bullshit, I hear you saying. Yes, I can hear you, I'm inside your house. Duster used more than that melody when I played the game. That's because this was fixed in version 1.2 of the English translation patch, so most non-Japanese players never encountered this. Apple Kid and Orange Kid are Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. I couldn't find anything on this one. The only thing connecting Apple Kid and Steve Jobs is the word apple, and maybe you could say Orange Kid sorta looks like Bill Gates? I don't know, this is just comparing apples and oranges at this point. Okay, tough crowd, Jesus. Twinkle Elementary School Time Machine. After Lloyd blows up the lab in Twinkle Elementary School, if you go back inside it, the mysterious teacher will be inside and sells items that Lloyd can use. Most of these are joke items and complete wastes of money, but in Mother 1, one of these items he sells is the Time Machine. Once bought, he'll activate it by accident and transport the party back in time to when the lab was destroyed. For whatever reason, he doesn't sell the Time Machine in Earthbound Beginnings and instead sells super bombs, which is no doubt an improvement, don't get me wrong. Though with a bit of hacking, the event can be restored, as seen in the background footage. Both the item and the event don't exist in the GBA port, however. Happy Happyism's connection to Aum Shinrikyo. Aum Shinrikyo is a Japanese cult founded by Shoko Asahara in 1984. The cult symbol and his attire are the same color as Happy Happyism, being all blue. The cult eventually became big enough for members to attempt to run for public office, though none succeeded. Their political campaign was known for being happy and using cheerful slogans, dances, singing, and smiling balloons. Their headquarters was located on a dairy farm, which is probably why there's a blue cow in Happy Happy Village. Aum Shinrikyo was responsible for 2 terrorist attacks in 1994 and 95. The former, known as the Matsumoto sarin attack, involved a chemical weapon named sarin and left 8 dead and over 200 injured. The latter, known as the Tokyo subway sarin attack, killed 13 people and affected 980 others. Thankfully, Happy Happyism in-game never exceeds being a silly cult that wants to paint the world blue, but their striking similarities to Aum Shinrikyo make them feel way more sinister. Mother 3 hot dog stand theory. This refers to an insanely detailed theory about how the hot dog vendor in Mother 3 is actually an older Ness who was brought to the Nowhere Islands from another timeline and brainwashed by Porky. I'm not even gonna try to summarize it here, I'll just link it in the description for you guys to check out if you want. Let me warn you though, it's really fucking long. Ninten's love of the San Francisco Giants. According to the Mother Encyclopedia, Ninten is a big fan of the San Francisco Giants, and he has a signed baseball from them as one of his most prized possessions. Dirty Cafe Assassination Attempt. This refers to a cut item sold at the Dirty Cafe in Mother 3 called Suspicious Tea that deals damage to enemies when used. The description said it was made by a disgruntled employee, meaning it could have been made by an angry employee with the intent to poison or even kill whoever drank it. Happy End. This is an unused graphic for the ending in Mother 3 that just says Happy End. This implies that there were multiple endings at some point, possibly being triggered by the sort of unused kindness stat. The Ghost of the Hot Spring. There's a random chance that an old man will be sitting in a hot spring in Mother 3. You'll probably see him at least a few times while playing the game. However, sometimes a woman will be found in the hot spring instead, but she's much rarer. I don't have exact numbers, but to put it in perspective, I've played Mother 3 3 times, and I've seen the old man plenty of times in all 3 of those playthroughs, but I've never seen the hot spring woman. I didn't even know she existed until making this video. Piggy Jelly and Peanut Cheese. Piggy Jelly and Peanut Cheese bars are food items only found in Saturn Valley. Peanut cheese is basically the Japanese word for peanut butter, and Piggy Jelly might be aspic or something. Just some weird naming conventions to fit in with the overall vibe of the Mr. Saturns. Pedophile Pig Mask in Thunder Tower. For starters, this pig mask isn't even in Thunder Tower, he's in the factory before the highway. He gives Lucas a secret herb as a present from the bottom of his heart, and that he always wanted to do this for you. Not for any weird reason though, strictly in a friend sense. Gabe said it struck him as suspicious, but I really don't see anything. The contents of the Overcoming Shyness book. Once you lend the Overcoming Shyness book to the leader of the Tenda tribe, he reads it to the whole tribe, and after that, they are all cured of their shyness, and are more than happy to talk to Ness and company. From this, we can infer that whatever is written in that book is capable of instantly curing someone's shyness just by reading it once. This is a subtle reference to how Earthbound is a work of fiction. Open bracket file equals quotation mark dot -8e.txt quotation mark close bracket. Fuck. This refers to an unused block of text in Mother 3 that just reads open bracket file equals quotation mark dot -8e.txt quotation mark close bracket. There's not much else to say. It's just really weird for a block of text to display whatever that was. Earthbound Crypt of the Ancients. This one refers to an Earthbound creepypasta of the same name. I'm not gonna describe it here, go look it up yourself. AVGN's Gygus Theory. I forgot about this one until working on the video. Towards the end of the episode, the nerd talks about how he interprets Gygus. Basically, he says that Gygus is an eternal being of evil that is reincarnated as Ness, and that the end of the game involves him and his friends going back to the point Ness was born and driving Gygus from Ness's fetus, kinda like some sort of exorcism. Obviously, this contradicts a lot of things stated in the game, as well as events from Earthbound Beginnings, but the nerd said that he isn't aware of what happens in that game, and that this theory probably isn't true. Overall, it's a unique take on the Gygus fetus theory that I've never seen anyone else think of before. Gigu is Ninten's father. What? Porky's true age in Mother 3. We literally have no idea. He claims he's aged rapidly due to his time traveling, making him 1,000 or even 10,000 years old, but he's still a kid at heart, and is also somehow immortal now. Now, he could be exaggerating his age, but he's our only source, plus he looks really old and can't go 2 sentences without gasping for air, so he's probably right. Even so, we still don't have any exact numbers on his age, and probably never will. Lucas and Klaus are based on The Notebook, The Proof, and The Third Lie. The Notebook, The Proof, and The Third Lie are a trilogy of books about 2 twins named Lucas and Klaus in World War II Europe, who end up getting separated from each other. Itoi himself confirmed this in an interview, which I'll link in the description. Club Titiboo's Empty Room. I have no clue what this means, and neither does Gabe because he lost his notes on it. Next. Original final boss backgrounds in Mother 3. This needs little introduction. Itoi mentioned in an interview that he originally wanted the final boss to be a nightmarish sequence with no dialogue, but he toned it back due to it being too dark. However, there are still remnants of that plan in the game. These backgrounds are probably the most infamous unused assets in Mother 3, since not only are they, for lack of better words, fucking terrifying, but they're actually used on some placeholder enemies. There's a video of them in action uploaded all the way back in 2008, so I'll link that in the description. How Gigu became Gygus. To clarify, this is specifically asking how he went from this to this. The only thing we know for sure is that he somehow became so powerful that his mind and body were destroyed and had to be stored inside the Devil's Machine for his mind to stay intact. There's not a whole lot else to say here, as information on this subject is very scarce. The official images for items in Earthbound Beginnings. In Japan, there's an assload of different strategy guidebooks and such for the first two Mother games, with tons of very nice artwork for the games. Both of the Family Computer Mother Perfect strategy books have a lot of artworks of various items in the game, however I don't know if those are official. This point probably refers to the images found in the Mother Encyclopedia, since everything in that book is canon. Speaking of, the Mother Encyclopedia was an official guidebook that released around the same time as the game, and features a ton of artwork and background information about various characters and items. Unfortunately, the book's all in Japanese, and although someone did make a fan translation of it a while ago, it was a long time ago, and it's really not that good. Maybe one day that guy will go back and retranslate it, but if you want to read it before then, hope you know Japanese. Teddy died in the original ending of Mother 1. No, he didn't. Unlike Earthbound Beginnings and Mother 1+2, Mother 1 ended immediately after Gygus' ship left Earth and didn't have the scenes of what happened afterwards, one of which saying Teddy fully recovered from his injuries. Because of this, his fate was left unknown in Mother 1, but nowhere does it say he died. If you talk to him in the hospital bed after he gives his speech, there's just silence, but if you check him, it will say that he's still breathing, albeit very softly. Mr. Perkle and Miss Lardna's love nest. There's unused text in Mother 3 that says, "I'm the producer for Mr. Perkle and Miss Lardna's love nest." This references two characters from Earthbound, the mayor of Anna and Porky's mom respectively, and being the producer implies that it's a film of some sort. And with a name like Love Nest, I'll leave you to interpret what kind of film it could have been. It's stored in an empty room in the mayor's office in Tazmily Village, so I don't know where it could have been used. The people from the White Ship. So we all know about how all the residents of Tazmily came to the Nowhere Islands on the White Ship once the world ended. We know that they removed all their memories and put them into the Egg of Light, then adopted their fabricated memories and lives. But who were these people before they lost their memory? The only person with any info about them before the Egg of Light stuff is Kumatora, which is that she was an orphaned infant. But that's really all we have. Who were her parents and how did they die? What was everyone else like before they sealed their memories away? With as little information on this as there is, your guess is as good as mine. I guess you could say he's Gygus-y. Another unused block of text in Mother 3, this time located in the Chimera Lab. It's probably referring to the ultimate Chimera before it escaped. As for how this guard knows about Gygus, it's just a case of a line not translating well into English. See, in the original script, he was trying to put the feeling into a word that didn't exist, and it just happened to come out as Gigu, which is Gygus' name in Japan. Japanese uses sound words to express feelings all the time, so this isn't anything unusual. In fact, Ito even said that he came up with Gigu's name from the fact that it simply sounded unpleasant and disturbing. Earthbound Beginnings takes place after Mother 3. This theory stems from some questions people have had about the inconsistencies or lack of ties between the first two games, such as, why is America never mentioned at all in Earthbound? Why does Gygus attack Earth again so soon after his first invasion? Why doesn't anyone in Earthbound acknowledge Gygus' existence if he attacked before? Why does Gygus look entirely different in Earthbound than he does in Earthbound Beginnings? How do Ness and Paula have PSI powers? Couple these with Mother 3's ending, and it's possible that Earthbound Beginnings takes place in a rebooted timeline, which is why it has no ties to the subsequent games. Personally, I don't buy this theory because I feel most of these questions have answers. I've heard from Star that America straight up does not exist in the world of Earthbound, but that would mean there were only 3 continents in the entire world, which doesn't sit right with me. We also never see a map of the world in-game, so I think that America does exist in Earthbound, but you just never visit it during the game because there are no sanctuaries located there. If I'm right about the first question, then this one's easy to answer. Gygus only attacked America in Beginnings, so it makes sense that no one mentions him in Earthbound because, again, you don't visit America. As for why he looks so different, it's stated in Earthbound that he became so powerful that his mind and body were destroyed. We don't know how that happens exactly, but the important thing is that it does. As for the other 2 questions, I have no idea. Mother 3 political stances prevented localization. Anyone that's played Mother 3 knows that there's very not-so-subtle criticisms of capitalism and our current society. Tazmily Village starts off as a society with no money, with all work being voluntary, and everyone seems to be happy. But once Porky and the Pigmask Army introduce money to Tazmily and start to make their presence more known, we see the alienation of the citizens. They begin gossiping, and the general vibe of Tazmily becomes more selfish. The Clayman factory is portrayed as people doing mundane tasks for a set wage, and after finishing for the day, they spend their time at a bar because they're too tired to do anything else. Because of these underlying tones, amongst some other reasons I mentioned earlier, people have speculated that Nintendo doesn't want to localize the game because they don't want to deal with any controversy it might spawn, despite how loud and how long people have been requesting it. From here on out, it's mostly fan theories and speculation. The Bird of Light. The Bird of Light is mentioned in the unused memo menu as the counterpart to the Dark Dragon. That of the Dark Dragon is in the antithesis: darkness and light, despair and hope, destruction and creation. Interestingly, though this bird is never mentioned anywhere in-game, the painting in the Forest Pear Sanctuary depicts two dragons, the Dark Dragon and another, lighter one, possibly the Bird of Light. The painting might be a remnant of the Bird of Light, and they just forgot to get rid of it when they scrapped the idea. It also might have had connections to the Egg of Light, since that isn't really explained all too well either. This concept was probably more expanded upon when the game was still on the N64 DD. Kumatora's understated importance in Mother 3. As stated in Letter's monologue, Kumatora was given to the Magypsies to be raised, despite being a human, and given the role of Princess of Asohe Castle. There's no reason as to why they did this, other than the fact she was an orphaned infant. Letter did state that the story that the people of the White Ship wrote was rushed, so maybe they couldn't think of anything else to do with her role, but that still doesn't explain why they sent Kumatora specifically off to the Magypsies in the first place, and no one else. Perhaps there was another reason that they just didn't have time to record. The Cliff That Time Forgot and Cave of the Past oddities. This area is fucking weird. Earthbound has a lot of weird locations, but this one is just inexplicable. It's barely talked about in-game, and there are so many questions that arise from it. Why is there a random cliff with lush green grass deep underground in the middle of an empty black void? Why is there a weird tentacle here? What's the significance of it? It almost seems like something you'd find in Magic Hand or something. Why does it look completely different in the past? What's at the bottom of the cliffs? And what personally confuses me the most is, why the hell is there an entrance to the Lost Underworld here? I never hear anyone talk about this. It literally has no reason to even be there. You're just stuck on an island if you come through that entrance. There's nothing to do. Furthermore, why do you need the phase disorder to get here when you can just enter through the Lost Underworld? Why is the cliff even connected to the Lost Underworld at all? Why does said entrance not exist in the past? So many questions and practically no answers. Fun fact, the layout of the final cave in Mother 3 is nearly identical to the Cave of the Past. I don't think this has any lore significance, and is probably just a callback by the devs, but it's a pretty cool detail. Lost Underworld oddities. Speaking of the Lost Underworld, let's talk about that now. This place didn't strike me as too odd when I first played the game. I guess dinosaurs just feel par for the course after fighting alien octopus robots and sentient trees that explode. But this place gets really weird when you stop and think about it. Starting with the dinosaur in the room, how are they still alive? Maybe they survived the asteroid because they were underground, but how did they get there? That entrance hole in Lumen Hall is way too small for a dinosaur to fit through. I guess they could have been much smaller in the past and just evolved to be bigger over the 60 million years since the dinosaur extinction. But enough about them. How are there trees and vegetation down here if there's no sunlight? What the fuck is this thing? What's the deal with the fire spring? Specifically, the area with the tiny volcano is also in an empty black void, and it's just south of where the Cliff That Time Forgot is. Are the two connected? When playing the game, I never thought too much about this, but I realized something pretty unsettling about Fire Spring while writing this. There are humans down there, what the shit? These guys are so out of place. Almost every other human enemy in the game is in some kind of man-made civilization, like a town or city or something. But these guys are so far removed from any kind of human activity. How and why are they down here, and more importantly, why are they wearing salt shakers? I think I'm looking too deep into this. Lucas dies in Chapter 6. No, he doesn't. There's 2 chapters after 6 where he is clearly alive. I could understand the argument that Chapter 6 was a dream, but the boy ain't dead, that's for sure. The doorknob is Hinawa. Recall that the doorknob breaks off at the beginning of Chapter 1, right about when Hinawa would have died. The theory is that Hinawa exists within the doorknob, and that's why it follows the party around and appears throughout their journey. Basically, it's saying that Hinawa's spirit was watching over Lucas and his friends. Honestly, it's not too far-fetched, but the doorknob's physical appearances are way too far and few between for me to believe it. It only appears in 3 chapters, the end sequence, and is mentioned but not seen in 2 more. If it physically showed up in every chapter, aside from 6, then I believe it more. but hey, at least this one makes sense. Manny Manny statue melted by Porky to create the Nice Person Hot Springs. In one floor of the Empire Pork Building, there are a ton of tubes with people and animals floating in them called the Nice Person Hot Springs. Talking to these people shows that the liquid turns anyone that soaks in it loyal and obedient to Porky, kinda like how the Manny Manny statue corrupts people and spreads Gygas's power and influence. Since the statue doesn't appear in Porky's little Earthbound museum, Gabe told me that maybe Porky melted it and used it to control people himself. Thing is, there's a lot of those tubes. I don't think melting a single statue could produce that much liquid. If anything, those tubes are very reminiscent of the tubes Gygas's forces used to store humans in the previous two games, in both Mount Itoy and the Stonehenge base respectively. They could be using the same technology, but we don't know for sure. The Gods of Scaraba. The hieroglyph in the Summers Cultural Museum says a lot of interesting shit, including mentioning the Gods of Scaraba, but also what may have been humanity's first encounter with Gygas's race many years ago. To fight against the invaders, we built this pyramid fortress. However, our efforts were futile and we lost. Nonetheless, our pyramid was protected by the Gods of Scaraba. The invaders will be reborn every millennium and will attack again. Even now, the invaders hide beyond space and time and build their evil stronghold. A place out of time is beyond the dark, and is even farther beyond the lost underworld. The deep darkness is shrouded, it is without light. Only one with the Hawkeye can pierce the dark. The Sphinx now watches over everything, waiting for the coming of a truly brave hero. Amateur Gamer on Starman.net made a really good theory about what this all means, which I'll link in the description, as well as briefly summarize here. Basically, we know that the ancient people of Scaraba lost against the alien invaders, but that their pyramid was protected by the Gods of Scaraba. What the gods probably did was possess the hieroglyphs inside and reanimated the defeated bodies of the Scarabians, like the Shatterman and Royal Guards. The gods use PSI to defend the pyramid, as shown by the hieroglyphs that inhabit the pyramid being capable of PSI. This also explains why they're called Guardian Hieroglyphs, because they're guarding the pyramid, its inhabitants, and the Hawkeye from the invaders. The original post goes into more detail and covers other topics mentioned in the hieroglyphs too, so go check it out if you're interested. Mother 3 is communist propaganda. C. Pig masks represent America, and Mother 3 political stances prevented localization. Tendas and Mr. Saturns have a common ancestor. This is pure speculation, but it's interesting to compare the two species. They're both really weird, small creatures with vaguely human characteristics that live in isolated regions of the Earth, and their villages contain the only hot springs in the entire game, which both have some strange pink liquid in them. Of course, their speaking mannerisms are vastly different, but even though the Tendas talk normally, and act much less peculiar overall, they're just as, if not more isolated from human contact than the Mr. Saturns are. They also both seem to enjoy putting LSD in their beverages. These are probably coincidences, but they're interesting to think about. Unused Clumsy Robot alternate ending. Using a walkthrough boss cheat, if you go and beat the Clumsy Robot before paying off the Runaway 5's debt, once defeated it will spew out smoke and teleport the party outside of the Monotoli building. It's impossible to see this without cheating, since freeing the Runaway 5 has to be done before Paula even gets kidnapped, and you can't even access the upper part of the Monotoli building until she's kidnapped, as well as doing several other events. Maybe at one point in development, the Diamond Fetch quest in the desert was supposed to happen after Paula got kidnapped, possibly after the Trout Yogurt dispenser is obtained, and if you tried to go get her before freeing the Runaway 5, you'd just be sent out of the building. Personally, I'm glad this isn't the case, because imagine having to do the mole dungeon with only Ness and Jeff. No thanks. Mother 3 Evangelion connections. Neon Genesis Evangelion and Mother 3 have a couple, albeit most likely coincidental, similarities. Most notably, the main characters in both are all motherless, and both Mother 3's ending and the end of Evangelion involve everyone seemingly dying, resulting from the Dark Dragon being awakened and the completion of the Instrumentality project respectively. Also, some people think that the Mineralia enemies found in the last cave in Mother 3 are a reference to the angel Ramil, but they're probably referencing the octahedron overworld sprites that numerous enemies used in Earthbound, as their overworld sprite is nearly identical to that. However, Earthbound was being developed around the same time Sega Genesect Lime Gelatin was airing, so they could have been referencing Ramil all along, but who knows. There's a blog post that goes into more detail on this topic that I'll link in the description. What did Porky do? Most of Porky's attacks in Mother 3 are just a statement, "What did Porky do?" followed by one of several attacks. It's just a callback to Gygas's incomprehensible attacks, since it wouldn't be an endgame Mother boss without attacks you can't decipher. PK abilities are transferred through child sex abuse. This is a joke based off that scene in Chapter 4. It's very clearly just a visual gag, and not at all what it looks like. Moving on. Mother 3 is a Posadist allegory. Posadism is a set of beliefs primarily defined by the works of J. Posadas, an Argentinian political theorist from the 50s to the 70s, centered around communism, aliens, and the apocalypse. Posadas believed that nuclear war is inevitable, necessary, and will lead to the demise of capitalism. Mother 3 as a whole already has some anti-capitalist themes, and the consistent themes of alien forces and anti-industrialization can be compared to Posadist thought. The pulling of the needles could be compared to nuclear war, and Porky's forces could be compared to America, as previously discussed in this video. The biggest issue with this theory is that Posadas believed aliens would be benevolent, which is the exact opposite of the Mother series, and I really don't think that Itoi was inspired by Posadist thought while making Mother 3. But I will admit the idea that the apocalypse is the only way to destroy capitalism is sorta shared between both. Why Ninten's dad was calling at the end of Earthbound Beginnings. The extended endings of Earthbound Beginnings, and later Mother 1+2, have a scene at the end showing Ninten's dad calling him, saying that something new has come up. Obviously, we have no idea what he's talking about since Ninten's story is never continued. I think this could have been Itoi teasing the idea of a sequel, and maybe Mother 2 was originally going to be a direct follow-up, but later became a more separated story. There's no source for any of this, I'm just spitballing. Mother 3's undercurrent of neglect and abuse. There's a somewhat constant theme of abuse throughout the game that's never fully addressed. Some cases, like Salsa in the entirety of Chapter 3, are obvious and mostly addressed, but others are rarely, if ever, addressed. Almost everyone you play as faces some kind of neglect aside from Flint and Boney. Lucas seems obvious, with him losing his mom and brother, but they never really touch on how Flint spent pretty much all his time searching for Klaus in the mountains and not really being there to support Lucas. Or how everyone calls him a wimp and a crybaby even after the events of Chapter 1. Like, goddamn bitch, I'd be crying if I saw my mom get killed. Duster's relationship with Wes is pretty not good either, with how harsh he treats Duster in Chapter 2, and the fact that he's responsible for giving Duster his limp. However, if Lucas returns to Wes in Chapters 5 or 7, Wes is shown to legitimately care about Duster's well-being, and is glad he got to see him again. But that's seemingly the only case of abuse that gets resolved, whereas the others are rarely mentioned. The other dimensions the pig masks were kicked from. Aside from the Magypsies and the residents of Tazmily, everyone on the Nowhere Islands, including the pig masks, were brought there from other dimensions by Porky. It's mentioned by Letter briefly in his monologue, but we have no clue what these other dimensions are, or why Nowhere Islands were the one place they weren't kicked from. How exactly do you get kicked from a timeline anyway? And come to think of it, how does time travel even work in the Mother series? Does it operate like Back to the Future, or does it use multiverse theory? It's probably multiverse theory. God, I hate time travel. Nintendo allows the Mother 3 fan translation to exist because Mother 3 will never be released without heavy censoring. Isn't it strange how the Mother 3 fan translation has existed for over 10 years now, and not once has Nintendo issued it to be taken down, especially given their track record when it comes to these kind of things? It is a ROM hack after all. A lot of people have theorized that this isn't coincidence, and that it's because Nintendo knows of its existence and chooses to let it stay up. Because not only would it save them the work of having to censor the game, but because the fan translation is better than anything they could do. A pretty big piece of evidence for this is the Mother 3 email. In October 2008, about a night before the translation patch was officially released, Clyde Tomato Mandolin, the head of the translation project, got an anonymous email claiming to have been sent from somebody inside the gaming industry, which warned that the fan translation would destroy any incentive for an official release, as its quality outmatched what an official localization could provide. They encouraged the team to cancel the translation patch, despite it being literally the night before release. By checking the email header info, it seemed to have originated from Japan, but that's all that could be figured out. Neither Tomato or the rest of the team were certain about the credibility of this email, so they released the patch the next day. To this day, we still don't know if that email was legitimate or a hoax. Maybe Tomato really did do such a good job to the point where an official localization would be inferior to his. Or maybe Nintendo just doesn't care enough about the series to take it down. It's anyone's guess, really. Frightbot's story. The Frightbots are used by the Pigmasks in Saturn Valley as a way of psychological torture for the Mr. Saturns, in an attempt to make them tell the location of the nearby needle. The Frightbots also tell stories in battle. In fact, that's all they can do. The stories don't actually do anything to the party, but what story are they telling? Well, whatever it is, it's apparently so scary that it'll chill you to the bone, curdle your blood, and make you cover your ears in fear, pee your pants, and never want to go to the bathroom at night ever again. Perhaps humanity would be better off if this mystery remains unsolved. Earthbound's influence on the modern RPG genre. There's a reason I've saved this one for last. This is a topic that you can make an entire video on. In fact, many people already have. It's no secret that Earthbound is one of the most acclaimed JRPGs of all time, and that's because there truly was nothing else like it when it came out. I'm sure you've heard time and time again about how its modern setting, flat colors, weird enemy design, well-written dialogue made it stand out, blah blah blah, yada yada yada, but the Mother series' influence is far bigger than most people realize. Practically every JRPG that came out after 1995, be it indie or AAA, has at least a speck of influence from Earthbound in it. The first generation of Pokemon games shared a lot of developers from Mother and Earthbound. Trey Parker cited Earthbound as an influence for South Park: The Stick of Truth. The Lisa games, along with literally countless other indie RPGs, were all greatly inspired by Earthbound. We got Oddity, formerly Mother 4, coming out in the near future. Shit, even Animal Crossing is technically the evolved idea of what Earthbound 64 was originally supposed to be. Hell, Toy was originally a dev for it. Of course, you can't talk about Earthbound's influence without mentioning what is probably the biggest and most impactful indie game of the last decade, that being Undertale. The game was literally made by a former Earthbound ROM hacker, and when it came out, it blew up unbelievably hard. Not only has Undertale been released in Japan sooner than Mother 3 has been officially released in the West, not only is it on the Switch, but we even have a Sans Mii costume in fucking Smash Bros. We live in a timeline where a song originating from an Earthbound ROM hack is in Smash, as a new arrangement made specifically for the game. It's like it came full circle. What I've talked about here is only a brief summary of the impact of Earthbound, so I strongly recommend watching one of the many videos on this subject, or to research it yourself. Well, that's everything. I don't usually do videos like this, but working on this was really fun, but don't expect more like this in the near future. Hopefully you learned something new from this Iceberg. I know I certainly did. It's super fun to research something you love and enjoy, so I hope you check out the resources I linked in the description. No, really. If you have some time, go read the cutting room floor page on a game you really like, and chances are you'll come out with something you didn't know before. This took way longer to finish than I expected. I started this back in mid-November, and I wanted it to be done by the holidays, but come Thanksgiving, I was beginning to think I bit off more than I could chew. And once finals picked up, I basically had to stop all progress so I can study for those. Consider this video a late Christmas present. Special thanks to the creators of the Iceberg images that inspired me, but even specialer thanks to these two, as well as to the lovely people over at starman.net, Earthbound Central, The Cutting Room Floor, Mother Forever, various other websites, and most importantly, to viewers like you. If there's anything I didn't mention that you think should have been on here, or if I got something wrong, then let me know how much of a stupid idiot I am in the comments, and I'll probably see it. I don't really have anything better to do. Oh shit, the script just hit 26 pages. I think I'll take that as my cue to stop talking. So, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and I'll see you when I see you.